The 2025 Miami Grand Prix was supposed to be a turning point, a chance for Ferrari to finally make their mark and prove they were ready to fight at the front. But instead, what we saw was a series of missteps, mistakes, and a growing sense of frustration that was impossible to ignore. McLaren, the surprise package of the season, executed a perfect 1-2 finish. But as the checkered flag fell in Miami, all eyes weren't on the winners. They were on a disappointed Lewis Hamilton who, despite his legendary status, was forced to watch as his dream Ferrari comeback turned into an ongoing nightmare. For Ferrari, the SF25, an ambitious car they hoped would challenge for wins, was nowhere near the pace. On-track performance, lacking, strategy, questionable, and the car simply not fast enough to compete with the likes of McLaren and Red Bull. But it wasn't just the car that was the problem. The real issue was the tension, the uncertainty, and the palpable frustration from Hamilton. As he struggled in the cockpit, the radio messages told a story of growing disillusionment. For someone who came to Ferrari to finish his career on a high, it's starting to feel like this dream might be slipping away. In today's video, we're going to break down the entire Miami Grand Prix. We'll dive deep into Ferrari's car woes, Hamilton's intense frustration, and the tough questions now facing the Scuderia. Was this a one-off, or is it a sign of things to come? Stick around to find out. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button if you're a fan of F1 and want more race breakdowns just like this. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. And if you've got thoughts on Ferrari's struggles or Hamilton's frustration, let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you. Ferrari came into the 2025 Miami Grand Prix with high expectations. After a disappointing start to the season, the team had promised that the updates to the SF25 would finally bring them closer to the frontrunners, McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes. The new parts were designed to improve aerodynamics, tyre management, and overall balance. This was supposed to be their weekend to show the world that Ferrari was ready to compete again at the top. But as the weekend unfolded, it was clear, Ferrari's problems weren't just technical, they were deeper than that. Let's rewind to Friday, where Ferrari's struggles began to surface. The team, after weeks of work in the wind tunnel and in simulation, hoped the SF25 would finally give them a competitive edge. But the reality was different. The car was inconsistent, lacking grip in key sections of the track, especially in the low-speed corners where Miami demands precision. There was a clear lack of stability. The front end didn't bite and the rear was twitchy. As a result, both Leclerc and Hamilton struggled to get comfortable in the car. They couldn't find a balance between aggressiveness and tire preservation, which is essential in the heat of Miami. By the time qualifying came around, the frustration was palpable. In a session that Ferrari needed to capitalize on, Charles Leclerc could only manage P8, just scraping through to Q3. And as for Lewis Hamilton, well, he found himself down in P10, staring at a middle-of-the-pack start. For a team that had once dominated the grid, to see both drivers struggling to even make the top 10 was a brutal reminder of how far they had fallen. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Ferrari had promised improvements, but this felt like a setback. A team that was supposed to be in the title fight was now in a race just to stay relevant. And what made it worse was the fact that Ferrari wasn't just losing to Red Bull or McLaren, their real competition had shifted. Teams like Alpine, Aston Martin, and even Alpine were outpacing them. Ferrari, in many ways, was fighting not just for wins but for respect. But what really struck a chord over the weekend wasn't just the on-track performance, it was the complete contrast in mood during the Lego race. Now, for those who may have missed it, this was the fun, offbeat event where drivers like Hamilton and Leclerc took part in a Lego-themed challenge, racing full-size Lego cars built to the actual size of F1 vehicles. And here's where things get interesting. Both Hamilton and Leclerc were smiling, laughing, and having fun. It was clear, this was where they actually enjoyed themselves. Both drivers were genuinely excited to take part in the Lego race. Leclerc, who'd spent the entire weekend trying to wring some performance out of the SF25, was actually beaming as he climbed into his full-scale Lego car. Hamilton, who was visibly frustrated by the lack of speed in his Ferrari, had a grin plastered across his face as he took part in the challenge. The two of them seemed more relaxed and happier here, racing these massive Lego cars, than they did during the actual Grand Prix weekend. It was almost surreal. You could see the camaraderie, the genuine joy in the moment, and it was such a stark contrast to their moods later on when they got into the Ferrari cockpits for the actual race. Race day was a disaster. In the searing heat of the Miami sun, the SF25 simply couldn't hold its own. From the start of the race, it became clear that Ferrari's tyre management issues were going to be a massive problem. The car chewed through its rubber at an alarming rate. By lap 20, both Leclerc and Hamilton were already dealing with massive tyre degradation, while the cars in front, like McLaren, were able to extend their stints and look after their tyres much better. Ferrari's strategy calls only added to the chaos. In a bid to make up positions, the team opted for aggressive pit strategies, calling both drivers in early for tyre changes that didn't pan out. These decisions were reactive, not proactive, made on the fly with little foresight. The team was simply trying to salvage a race that was slipping away. And it wasn't just the pit wall that was caught off guard. In the cockpit, both Leclerc and Hamilton were left to deal with poor tyre performance, traffic, and an overall lack of pace. As the laps ticked on, the situation became increasingly dire. Ferrari's drivers were slipping back, losing ground not just to the leaders, but also to their midfield rivals. While McLaren cruised towards a dominant 1-2 finish, Ferrari's SF25 struggled to maintain pace. By the time the checkered flag came down, Hamilton crossed the line in a disappointing 8th place. Leclerc, battling with tyre wear and a lack of confidence in the car, finished in 7th place. For Ferrari, this was a nightmare scenario. Their weekend was not just about a lack of performance, it was about a lack of progress. The updates they brought seemed to only highlight the weaknesses in their car. They weren't just outclassed by Red Bull and McLaren, they were being beaten by teams that Ferrari has historically dominated. It's hard not to draw parallels to past seasons, Ferrari's inability to capitalize on their potential. McLaren, the surprise package of 2025, had found the sweet spot with their car and strategy, delivering an impeccable performance. Meanwhile, Ferrari, despite all the resources, history, and talent, was falling further behind. It was a humbling moment for a team that had once ruled the sport. And what's worse, the clock is ticking. Ferrari needs results, and they need them fast. This season isn't about rebuilding, it's about redemption. But in Miami, they showed that the road to recovery will be much longer and harder than anyone had hoped. After all the struggles on track, the Lego race remained the only true moment of joy for Hamilton and Leclerc during the entire Miami Grand Prix weekend. It was the one time they could relax, laugh, and enjoy the sport without the weight of performance and pressure hanging over them. The Lego race may have been a quirky, light-hearted event, but for both drivers, it was a rare escape. After days of battling with Ferrari's underperforming SF25, it was clear. The Lego cars, with all their fun and simplicity, were the only thing that gave them a break from the frustration of the real race weekend. It wasn't just about competition, it was a reminder of the joy that first drew them to racing. That one moment of fun before the reality of the race hit was a brief but much-needed relief for both Hamilton and Leclerc. It's incredible how this light-hearted, whimsical event highlighted a truth about Formula One. The mental and emotional toll on the drivers is immense. They are human beings after all. Despite being at the pinnacle of motorsport, it's easy to forget that underneath all the fame and fortune, there's a lot of stress and frustration. And in moments like these, when the competition is gone, when it's just about having fun, the pressure seems to vanish. That's when we see the true side of these athletes. But as soon as the Lego race was over, the real challenges awaited them. Back to the drawing board, back to the relentless race weekend grind, and back to the frustrations of dealing with cars that just weren't performing. And while the Lego race brought a smile to their faces, the reality of the weekend quickly sank back in. As much as Hamilton and Leclerc enjoyed racing the full-size Lego cars, the true battle was on the actual track, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Ferrari's SF25 just couldn't deliver the performance they needed. For Hamilton, the frustration of dealing with a car that wasn't responding to his commands was mounting with every passing lap. If Ferrari's lack of pace wasn't frustrating enough, the team's tyre management problems and questionable strategy calls made the situation even worse. The Miami circuit is notorious for its high surface temperatures and abrasive asphalt, and managing tyre wear here isn't just important, it's critical. But for Ferrari, it was a disaster from the very first stint. From as early as lap 10, both Hamilton and Leclerc were reporting high degradation. The SF25, already lacking grip, was overheating the tyres quickly, especially the rear set. Every time the drivers pushed to gain a position or defend against pressure, the tyres would overheat, lose performance, and drop off dramatically. The soft compound tyres they started on gave them almost no working window. Ferrari found themselves boxed into a corner. While teams like McLaren, Red Bull, and even Mercedes managed to stretch their first stints and build flexibility into their strategy, Ferrari had no such luxury. By lap 18, Leclerc was forced to pit early, switching to the medium compound far sooner than ideal. Hamilton followed not long after, but their undercut attempts were ineffective. They rejoined in traffic, unable to make meaningful progress. What made it worse was Ferrari's reactive, almost panicked strategy approach. There was no cohesion. While other teams were reading the race and adjusting with foresight, Ferrari appeared to be scrambling for solutions. Their strategy decisions seemed to come too late, or worse, too early, with no clear plan to counter the evolving race conditions. At one point, Hamilton questioned over team radio whether staying out longer would have helped, noting that the tyres, though degraded, were still marginally usable. The response was vague. That moment encapsulated Ferrari's race, a lack of clarity, confidence, and coordination. The second stint didn't fare much better. Ferrari tried to gamble on a two-stop strategy, hoping fresher tyres in the final laps would give them a late race edge. But by then, the damage was done. They had already lost track position, and any advantage from fresher rubber was neutralized by traffic and poor timing. The SF25's inconsistency made it nearly impossible to execute any strategy effectively. Meanwhile, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were executing near-flawless races, saving tyres when needed and pushing when it mattered. McLaren's strategic execution looked like a team that had complete confidence in its car and its drivers. Ferrari, by contrast, looked lost. In Formula One, strategy is half the battle, but strategy without tyre performance is a one-way ticket to nowhere. And that's exactly where Ferrari found themselves in Miami, trapped in a cycle of tyre wear, bad timing, and missed opportunities. It was the kind of weekend that not only frustrates drivers, but deeply embarrasses a team with Ferrari's legacy. But while Hamilton struggled with frustration and Ferrari floundered with strategy, Charles Leclerc was left to fight his own lonely battle on track, a battle that raises bigger questions about his future and Ferrari's long-term direction. As Lewis Hamilton battled with frustration and fading tyres, Charles Leclerc wasn't faring much better. The Monegasque driver, now in his sixth full season with Ferrari, entered Miami with hopes of mounting a serious championship campaign. Instead, he was stuck in damage control, just like his teammate. Leclerc qualified ahead of Hamilton, starting in P7, but that slight advantage didn't mean much once the lights went out. From the very first stint, Leclerc found himself stuck in traffic, unable to make any meaningful progress. The SF25 lacked straight-line speed, struggled with traction out of slow corners, and once again, tyre degradation reared its head. It was clear from his radio messages that Leclerc was just as baffled as Hamilton. He was being overtaken with ease on the straights and had to drive defensively to avoid losing multiple places in one lap. His car setup, meant to protect the tyres, left him vulnerable in wheel-to-wheel combat. The end result? A lonely, uninspiring race that saw him finish outside the top 6 again. This wasn't just a bad weekend for Leclerc, it was another chapter in what's becoming a worrying trend. The SF25 was supposed to be the car that closed the gap to Red Bull and Mercedes, but it's quickly becoming apparent that Ferrari has fallen even further behind, especially as McLaren continues its surge, and the pressure on Leclerc is only growing. Despite his unquestionable talent, questions about his long-term future with Ferrari are creeping in. With Hamilton now in the garage alongside him, the team dynamics have shifted. Ferrari brought in a 7-time world champion to elevate the team, but instead, both drivers are struggling in equal measure. Leclerc has remained loyal to the Scuderia through thick and thin, but how long can that last? He's now in a car that doesn't allow him to showcase his potential, and each race like this pushes him further away from the front-running fight. There's only so much patience a driver can have, especially one who's watched his peers move into more competitive machinery. For Ferrari, the problem is systemic. It's not just about Miami, it's about a pattern of underperformance that stretches back years. Different team principles, new technical staff, redesigned cars, yet the results continue to fall short. And in Miami, the gap was exposed again, not just in raw pace, but in strategy, adaptability, and leadership. Leclerc is fighting not just for points, but for relevance, for belief. And after a race like this, you can't help but wonder how much longer he'll keep believing in Ferrari's vision, especially when that vision seems clouded with each passing weekend. While Ferrari struggled, McLaren quietly stole the spotlight in Miami. Lando Norris, fresh off his first career win in China, backed it up with another stellar drive, fast, composed, and perfectly executed. With a podium finish and race-leading pace, he proved McLaren's breakthrough wasn't a one-off, it's real, and it's here. Behind him, Oscar Piastri continued to show why McLaren now has one of the strongest driver pairings on the grid. The The team's strategy was sharp, tire wear was under control, and their confidence was unmistakable. They looked like contenders because they are. More importantly, McLaren's rise puts even more pressure on Ferrari. If McLaren, once a midfield team, can leapfrog them in both pace and execution, what's Ferrari's excuse now? Miami wasn't just another race, it was a warning. McLaren is coming, and fast. As the dust settles on the 2025 Miami Grand Prix, the headlines write themselves. McLaren is rising, Red Bull remains the gold standard, and Ferrari is stuck in a storm of their own making. For a team that defines Formula One history, Miami wasn't just a misstep, it was a wake-up call. Lewis Hamilton joined Ferrari for a fresh start, a bold move, but 5 races in and that vision is already under threat. The SF25 isn't fast enough, the tire wear is crippling, and the race strategies leave more questions than answers. Hamilton is frustrated, Leclerc is isolated, and the Scuderia spiraling. Meanwhile, McLaren has turned potential into performance. Norris is delivering, Piastri is rising, the car works, the strategy makes sense, the belief is back, and the gap between them and Ferrari widening every weekend. So what now for Ferrari? Can they regroup before the season slips away? Can Hamilton weather this storm, or will this experiment be another lost cause in Maranello's modern history? One thing is certain, Miami exposed more than just Ferrari's flaws. It exposed the growing divide between who they are and who they pretend to be. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more race breakdowns, insight, and real talk about the state of Formula One, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. And drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Hamilton made the right move? Can Ferrari recover? We'll be reading every take. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you after the next Grand Prix.